and I'm seeing myself. So I'd like to welcome everybody here on the IOM Talk. Today we have a special English-speaking guest. That's why I'm also speaking English for this edition of the IOM Talk. My name is Björn Egemann. I'm part of Congress Media. We are a conference organizer from Germany, doing several events in Germany until March this year, 2020. We used to do presence business conferences, and since March we changed everything to the digital world. We're not just talking about the digital transformation, but we also did our own digital transformation. And accompanying to these different digital conference formats, we're having our IOM Talk as a weekly video podcast, you may say, and where I'm honored to invite myself each week interesting guests that I'm happy to speak with and speak with them about some specific topic. And today I'd like to welcome here on the show my guest, Luis Suarez.
Hi Björn. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Although, you never know how to answer that question anymore, right? Because if you tell people that you're doing well, they go like, you're like, really? And if you tell people that you're not doing that well, they go like, really? You need to have some kind of like help or something, right? So, but I'm doing well. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. And close friends are healthy. Work colleagues are healthy. So it's all going good from that point of view. And that's what I'm.
So you are known as the Mr. Zero Email formerly, but nowadays you are with another company also accompanying or helping other companies in finding their digital transformation way, very much data-driven also. We are with Panagenda. So you are following this digital transformation of workspace nearly since the beginning, I would say, as a collaboration specialist as IBM formerly, and nowadays in your position. So you're a long-term fellow on this topic, and I'm very happy to have you with me also on this talk this afternoon. You have been working in a distributed way, I think, all your lifetime, because you're situated on the Canarian Islands. So maybe we continue our chat, the private chatting we had before. So how's the weather on the Canarian Island?
Oh, the weather is lovely. The weather is lovely today. I mean, if you would have asked me that question last week where we had torrential rain and I was bailing out water from our house like nonstop, I would have told you all the story. But, after the storm, there's the calm, right? So we are now in the calm. So it's nice and gorgeous and relatively warm, as you can see there. So it's, and funny enough, I keep bumping into lots of various different articles and publications that are talking about this distributed world where people start working away from the office and how we're starting to look beyond working conditions and more into living conditions, right? I think, technology allows us to work anywhere. So why not enjoy it while, you have good fun with your personal life? And I realized earlier on this year that I made exactly that same decision 16 years ago, after having worked three more years remotely in the Netherlands where I was living. Right.
I wrote somewhere on some kind of news about Corona and COVID that the Canarian Islands, I mean the tourist resorts, they are switching to co-living, co-working spaces.
They are. Right? They are. I mean, if you look into, and this probably does not just apply to the Canaries, right? But a lot of the other different touristic destinations where all of a sudden tourism has been put to a halt, right? A lot of these various different regions, they depend on tourism as the vast majority of the income coming through, right? So what they have done is they have become a bit more creative, and they have said, well, instead of focusing on the short-term vacationers, why don't we just focus on the remote long-term workers, right? And there are a number of different spaces over here that are actually flipping the coin, and they become more like residential areas for remote workers for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and especially now in the winter time when it's relatively bad weather all over Europe, and here we still have got the 23, 24 degrees Celsius, right? So they are, it's a way of
Not at the
reinventing
moment, you told
themselves.
me before.
Yeah,
Not at the moment.
that's,
It's
this week
chilly.
is a bit of an exception. Is that it's just 19, which for me it's cold already, but I know that's Canarian standards. But the thing is that it's been an opportunity to be creative and do things different, right? And one of the things that is happening, I think, is that we're all realizing that if you had a good enough infrastructure, as in telecommunications or broadband connectivity, you can pretty much start thinking about different ways of working than away from that were back to the traditional office, right? So we're seeing a lot of that coming through, especially in the north of the island, for instance, in Gran Canaria. In the south of the island, there are already a number of different places that they're offering that opportunity, and they're actually doing, I mean, they're treating them as experiments to see how successful they are and what they can learn from them and how much they need to change and reframe how things work and everything else. And a really good friend of mine who founded an initiative called Re-People. So bring back people to areas that were relatively isolated or in the past, like rural areas and everything else, has got one of those initiatives going on. And they have got right now an experiment in a bungalow complex where they have got people all over Europe for a month working there, and then trying to make the most out of the conditions that we have now with the pandemic, obviously.
Well, this is a big chance for these regions, and so also for this whole rural and spatial development at the end, certainly, if the companies are prepared and ready for it. Are they?
Well, if you would have asked me in March this year, I would have
I
said
have
that
asked you in March
I
this
know, I
already.
know, and I
Already.
remember the conversations that I had, and I was basically saying that I don't think that I don't think the organizations had a choice at the time, right? More than anything else, because you and I have been in the space for so long that we know that this was inevitable. I mean, and I keep telling people, as bad, as tragic, and as dramatic as pandemic has been, and still is in different countries, the shift towards digital work and to move everything or almost everything to digital work, you and I, and amongst other different folks, we knew that was coming, right? The only thing that COVID has done has been an accelerator in terms of making it happen faster, right? But it's also true that a lot of what's been happening this year, or at least what I have observed, for the vast majority was nothing new, really, because in a way, technologies were already there. Uh, some organizations had flexible working schedules and flexible opportunities for people where they could work from home 1 day a week, for instance. The difference now again is that as an accelerator, now it's 5 days a week, right? But then the thing is that time has gone by. We have gotten used to the pandemic. We realize that we're probably not all of us going to die, and that means that organizations have started to realize that they would want their employees to slowly and steadily come back to the office. And in some different places, they have already done that. Um, Frankly, I think that was a bit disappointing. At least it was to me, because in a way, these organizations are treating it as something temporary, not necessarily something permanent, right? So that digital first move was just, oh yeah, we will do this while the pandemic is there, right? Once we have got vaccines coming up, like we're seeing starting, the UK started today, I think, vaccinating some folks. So over the next, I don't know, 3, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, we will see vast majority of the population getting vaccinated, which is going to be an interesting challenge on the supply chain and how it's going to be distributed. But again, that's another topic. But the thing is that I'm seeing how organizations are already starting to push people back into the office. And I don't blame the organizations. I do blame the people that run those organizations, because they are the ones who are forcing everyone else to go to the office, as opposed to think different in a way.
You can get them back into the office if they are just dislocated in their home offices. But
Hmm.
if we think about this really remote working mode where people are going to the Canarian Islands, I mean, so we must say this is not yet a model for uh, co-workers within big organizations.
It's not, but it's not because we cannot do it. It's because we don't want to do it, right? I think that there's a big thing in there, and a big theme in there. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing nowadays, especially in the last month or two, is how there are a lot of studies coming out that are starting to talk about how working from home, away from the office, so home being anywhere else, is actually a lot more stressful and fatigued and prone to being burned out than working at the office. And a lot of organizations are taking that, you know what, so in order for us to help you become less stressed, less fatigue or whatever, let's all go back again to the office. And my underlying message from those studies is that yes, they highlight an issue, and that issue is that we have tried to mimic online what was happening offline, and that was a big mistake. That means that we only did what we did because we thought that we had to replicate what was happening in the office. So believe me, at the office, we were also overloaded. We were also fatigued. We were also burned out. We were there disengaged. This has been going on for 20 years, if you look into the Gallup studies, right? But yeah, we seem to want to use those studies as an excuse to go and tell people, you know what, if you feel stressed at home, come back to the office, right? Whereas I would have hoped that people would have thought first, why am I stressed? Why am I overloaded? Why am I burned out? Is it because um, I'm doing things in the wrong way, right? And that's actually what's happening, because if you look into it, everyone is obsessed with doing virtual meetings, Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, WebEx, whatever, right? And that means that that's an exact copycat of what was happening in the face-to-face environment, where you were spending at the office 4, 5, 6 hours of meetings every day, and then you had to do your work. Obviously, we learn that even digitally, we cannot process that much doing all of these virtual meetings back to back, right? But then because of our silly mindsets in terms of presentism, uh, we thought as well that because no one can see us now because we're working from home and we're just in a little screen, I need to send more email. I need to send more private messages because I need to prove everyone that I'm working. That's mistake number two, right? And that basically obsession with synchronous collaboration has killed us, literally. And I know, there are different demographics, people above 55 and working moms especially, that they are desperate to go back to the office. And the reason for that is because for the first group, it was a way of socializing with friends, right? Not necessarily about work. It was a way of socializing because they were empty nesters and, they were alone at home with their spouses or whatever. And they said, you know what, I need to have my friends. I need to have my colleagues. So I need to go back to the office. And working moms, because somehow from a societal point of view, we haven't made the switch about, you know, spreading an equal share of the household duties, looking after the kids, the homeschooling, the daily household chores. We seem to have defaulted back again to working moms. And that's disgraceful, if you ask me, because we haven't learned much in terms of how digital can actually help as opposed to hinder our own productivity, right? My biggest concern in this whole transition that we're going through is that we still think in terms of presentism, in terms of, these are the many hours that I have to work to show that I'm working versus the results and the outcomes and the outputs, which is what we should be doing. And I know that because when I started working from home 19 years ago, I went exactly through the same thing. And it took me about 2 or 3 years to understand how I needed to, employ a different way of thinking and doing, right? And for us, it's been not even a year, right? So it hasn't been long enough for us to make that switch yet, in a way.
But there are always two sides of the coin. I mean, it's not just the organization. At first of all, the organization is just it's just a bundle of different individuals who
Yep.
set up some norms within some kind of organizing themselves. And then on the other side of the coin, it's also the individual, him and herself. I mean, you said yourself that it took you some time to enlarge or to grow with your mindset also,
Right.
in terms of that you don't need to show this presentism to justify that you're working.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
So and how do we solve the equation? I mean, do we just need to wait for some more year so people emerge with their mindset, because they come to the same point as you have become at some point of time, that, well, it's not me just about showing up the hours that I'm working, but showing the work that I'm doing.
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the switch that people probably have to make.
Right. And I think that what we need to do is to figure out a way to make it stick, right? So here's the thing. So one of the things that I have seen through the pandemic, when people were told that they need to work from home, is that now for the first time ever, everyone in the organization, including senior managers, know what it is like working from home. Before this pandemic, there was always this notion that working from home was all about slacking off, because you were doing the laundry, you were going to the fridge, you had to attend your kids, your elders, you name it. So you basically barely did any work. That was the perception from most people. So the reaction from a lot of senior managers was essentially, I don't want you to work from home because I know that you're not going to be working, you're going to be slacking off. That is gone, which is a good point, because now everyone will know what we are all going through when we work from home, right? So, and the reason why I interpret that is that, even though we may go to the office every day now again, there are times when you decide, hey, I'm going to work from home today. And the difference between now and before the pandemic is that when you go and say now to your colleagues and your manager, hey, I'm going to work from home today, your manager and your colleagues are going to say, okay, fair enough, let's go and catch up online, right? Whereas before was like, really? Are you going to work from home? Seriously? So that's a step forward. That's a step number one. Step number two is for us to understand that if I compare the office environment with the digital environment, so work anywhere, this is a truth that most people don't want to admit, but eventually will have to admit, is that I will always be more effective working digitally than working at the office, right? For a simple reason, documenting, right? When you work digitally, you pretty much document everything that you do, who you talk to, the emails, the private messaging, the meetings, the social networks, the communities, everything that you do. When you go to the office, vast majority of the face-to-face, you don't document, you don't write it down. So from a benefit point of view, working from home, working anywhere, will always be depends of the office environment, right? That's lesson number two. That I would say that we're starting to learn little by little there. I mean, there was the other thing as well is, and there's a context as to an initiative that's been going on at the moment right now. Many years ago, I bumped into this piece of research by HR teams where they were saying that according to the studies that they run, they were saying 1 hour of work at home would equal to 2.5 for the office. So when we start seeing now a lot of organizations experimenting with a 4-day work week, it's because of that. Because they are realizing that they no longer need to have those many hours to achieve the goals that they wanted to. Because of that deep focus, uninterrupted, with no distractions work happens a lot more often. You become a lot more productive with all of that, focus time. So you deliver those outputs and eventually realize that you no longer need to work 8 hours a day. And actually, if you would work 8 hours a day, it would equal 16 point whatever at the office. So we're going to see a lot more of that 4-work week experiments going on. And obviously, that's when the switch from the hours that you work to the results that you deliver will happen. To me, that's a matter of time. And that's a matter of time is having enough organizations doing that. And I'm starting to see, countries like New Zealand, Finland, here in Spain, there are 3 or 4 organizations that are doing that already throughout the pandemic. And they're noticing that there hasn't been a decrease in the productivity. There hasn't been a decrease in the outcomes. So they're saying, we're going to work 1 day less, but you're still going to get paid the same because you produce the same. That's happening through digital, right? Now, the interesting thing here, and this is something that you know as well, is that the number one issue that people have from digital versus the office is because people feel like, yeah, but I'm missing the chit chat, I'm missing the social interactions, I'm missing the bumping into each other in the corridors, the coffee at the water cooler, the lunches in the canteen, the gossip behind the meeting before the meetings start, right? All of that is the number one excuse that people will tell you now as to why they want back to the office. But this is where I go and tell them, okay, so have you guys used enterprise social networking tools? Because for the last 15 years, we have been saying that they were the new virtual water cooler, where you had conversations. Now, what happens here, and I know that people who may be listening to this live or even after the recording, they're not going to like this. We are lazy by nature. So what do? We prefer to go beyond to the office where you can provoke that bumping into each other just by walking by, right? Whereas when you go in a digital environment, you need to provoke it. You need to go to a space, you need to write down, or you need to speak, or like in text or audio, you need to talk to people. So it's more of an elaborate effort to do it, right? But here's the beauty of it. The more effort that you put into it, the more meaningful it becomes, the more impactful it becomes. So that's also rewiring our brain as to why we need to rely a bit more on those personal business relationships, but how we carry on with them digitally, right? Through enterprise social networking tools. I mean, a lot of people thought that they were dead. Boy, were they wrong. They're more alive than ever. Why? Because they introduced that whole notion of doing work asynchronously, distributed, networked through networks and communities, right? And I think that people are realizing that if I had this obsession with synchronous work and it wasn't working, I need to look into elsewhere. That's the elsewhere. The flip of the coin to say that I need to understand how I need to flip the way I work. And one of the things I was yesterday on an event um, around the working out loud movement, but it was talking about distributed work, and they were saying, could you share some insights as to what you have learned over the last few months and the last few years that you have been doing. And I remember how the first insight that I shared was be willing to challenge the current status quo. The current status quo is working in the office. And what I'm mentioning about being willing to challenge it is vast majority of people don't challenge it. They just take it as a given because inertia is a very powerful motivator to not want to do anything because you're conforming, right? So the be willing to challenge the status quo, it's more along the lines of, am I doing the work that I really want to do with the tools that I have got at my disposal? If the answer is yes, fine, good luck. If the answer is no, do something about it. That's the challenging of the status quo, right? And that's one of the things that is important in that distributed work notion or concept. That is the way the current status quo works is all office only, and that's what we need to challenge. We need to challenge more of these organizations and the people running the organizations and the folks working on those organizations. Do we want to continue like the way we were doing before the pandemic, or do we want to do things different? This pandemic, after all, is a pandemic, but there will be others, and there will be other global catastrophes. So for those folks who say, I'm not interested in doing this now because everyone is going to go back to the office, I will go and tell them, okay, good luck with the next one, because the next one may be worse than this one still. And this has been pretty bad, right? So go ahead.
But this applies for me a little bit that you always need this enlightened mindset that you're working self-determined, that you go up to people and keep up the social connections by yourself, and so on. Do we really have, well, can we really get all our co-workers into this mindset? Isn't this a bit too much conformity? On the other hand, that we are asking for or requesting for, that everybody is now thinking like this.
Well, if you look into it, Bjorn, I think that what I'm asking for is personal agency. So knowledge workers, employees, everyone that works for organizations to take a step forward and take more ownership and responsibility for the work that they do. So instead of letting it down to their managers to decide for them and do everything for them.
Some people don't want to take the ownership. They are fine with the situation.
Perfect. And I know that they are. And probably if you would ask me, that's the vast majority of the workforce right now, right? To those folks, I say, usually, if you don't want to think about other ways, if you don't want to do other ways and want to continue doing your own thing, fine. I've got no problem with that. But then don't come to me and bitch that you hate work. Don't come to me and complain that you don't like work, that it sucks, that it's awful, that it's horrendous, that I hate commuting to the office, that I hate being in the canteen, that I hate being with my colleagues because they are assholes and everything else, because you are provoking with your own non-personal agency those issues. And then you will not have an opportunity to say anything about anything else if you keep supporting that, right? So what I'm trying to say with all of this is that we need to think for ourselves, how do we become more self-sufficient and self-serving in the organizations that we work for? We cannot rely on inertia forever. The dinosaurs did that, and look where they are.
But,
right?
But we probably, the organizations still have to find a way to work also throughout probably many years, maybe even always, with some parts who still stick to this mindset.
Yeah, and here's the thing.
Can we combine this? So we have these people who are self-determined and doing working out loud, presenting their work on the networks, but they don't get feedbacks from those who are who don't like this way of working. But somehow they are also certainly in some processes they are relying on the feedback of those people, so they have to work somehow together.
Right.
So
and you know,
situation?
So the way organizations are trying to solve it is by introducing a hybrid model, right? And hybrid is probably being one of the most frequent words that I have heard over the last few months in terms of saying, allowing employees to work from home maybe 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, and then go to the office, right? Or for those who want to go to the office, to be at the office at all times. That flexibility at work is probably one step forward, right? That hybrid model is essentially how people will eventually make it happen. But I'm going to share a little secret. That hybrid model is a lie, because what the organizations are doing, and especially senior managers, when they are talking about this hybrid model, what they're actually doing and they're actually saying is, let's do this hybrid model for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years to see whether it sticks, right? And if it does, we continue going. And if it doesn't, we go back again to full office. The reason why I'm saying that is a lie is because I also started with a hybrid model. Back in 2001, I started working 2 days from the office and 3 days from home. And I realized that the moment that I was working from home, I was so much more productive and creative than being at the office. So when my manager was asking me, hey, what have you produced this week? I would go and say, well, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And then he would tell me, oh, you did that when you were at home. So what do you do at the office? And I say, yeah, the office I did done nothing because I was interrupted all the time. And it took me 5 hours of commute every day to go to the office. And it took me, before I would start my work, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't get shit done. But look at what I'm doing from home. Then he goes and he asked me, so why don't you work from home full time? I said, thank you. Can I? Yes, of course you can. That's how I started working 5 days from home. It took me 1.5 years to realize that. So so to the question, how can we convince those who don't want to change? Results, the outcomes. When there is enough of that critical mass who moves digital, who can prove and demonstrate how much more value, how much more or how many more deliverables and outcomes to, whether it's products, clients, whatever else, they're doing from working in a different way. The ones at the office will have to answer a key question. Do I want to continue working like I am, knowing that I will be in trouble, or do I want to change? And if they want to change, which still is their personal choice, obviously, right? They know that they will have the help because everyone else that's working now digitally will come forward to help them because they understand that they're all on the same boat. There's no I in team, remember? So we get everyone on board there. It's one of the reasons why the last few months I have spent tons of time myself coaching and advising organizations and senior leaders and practitioners about how to work distributedly. Did I get anything out of it? No, only a learning experience, as in the way of saying, understanding where people were coming from and what they were doing, right? And help them as much as I could. Why? Because I know what it is like seeing the other side of the tunnel. I know what it is like seeing the light. And I know how much more effective I am as an employee working in this way than if I were going to the office. And I want people to see that for themselves and experience it for themselves. So I think that the hybrid model is a way of sneaking it in. And I think that the moment that folks give it a try to say, I'm going to work from home 1 or 2 days, and they can see and compare how much more effective they are working from home versus working from the office, they will start doing a slowly switch to one point where they will go, I'm going to work from anywhere from here onwards. And we're talking about these things now, but also look into beyond work. Look into, I mean, you will see that a lot of people will tell you that they didn't enjoy working from home because of the stress of the pandemic, because of the worries and the fears about their loved ones, their kids at school or homeschooling or whatever. All of those are external factors towards the remote working experience, right? External as in something that you have to juggle with apart from work, right? Now, what's going to happen is that once the pandemic is under control and everything else, you will see how those external fears will disappear and mitigate themselves, which means that people are going to start questioning again, hey, actually working from home wasn't that bad. I no longer have to commute. I no longer have to buy clothes. I no longer have to pay for petrol. I no longer have to even live in a very expensive city because the office is there, right? I no longer have to go and fly 2, 3, 4 hours for a 1 hour meeting like I used to do, or 2 hour meeting, or half a day workshop, and have to spend 2 days traveling. That was my big aha moment this year, where because everyone has been working from home, now I know that the next time that someone will tell me, will you fly over 4 hours for a 2 hour meeting? I'm gonna go like, can we do a Zoom meeting? And they will tell me, yeah, of course we can. Look about the impact that that's also generating into our quality of life, right? We haven't looked yet deep enough into how much our quality of life has improved by challenging that status quo. And the way I use an analogy, which is essentially, if you look into how we used to work before the Industrial Revolution, is how we work now. We work from our home places. We work from our houses. We had like, the next door barn or whatever where we were doing the work, but our commute time was maybe 10, 50 meters. We built the entire fabric of the society through guilds, communities. Funny enough, we're coming back to it through digital. And I think that the more that people get used and exposed to that, eventually it's going to make the coin flip. So to me now, if you ask me, okay, so what is it going to be? Apart from what I mentioned earlier on, I think it is a matter of time. I think that as things settle
This
down,
implies again that you're thinking that we get the majority of people working in this mode at some point of time.
at one point in time, we will. I mean, look into, for instance, this winter is going to be an interesting one, right? I mean, we haven't started winter yet, right? But we know that because of climate change, if you want to, mention that, winters are becoming harsher. I mean, mainland Spain, there are areas where now they have got 1.5 meters of snow, right? So who's going to be the smarty pants who wants to work under those conditions when they know that they can do the exact same work that they have done for months from home? And I know what some folks are going to say, yeah, my boss is going to force me to go to work. And so yes, your boss is going to force you to go to work, but for how long? How long before you start looking for another job that is very welcoming to working anywhere and that allows you to have the freedom that your current boss doesn't give you? How much longer will you put up with that when there are lots of other folks there who are working in exactly the same conditions that you know that you could do it? When you have got other externalities, like for instance, harsher winters. I mean, it's one of the other things that we need to look into as well, right? And I mean, and a lot of people tell me, yeah, but when we tell people to stop going to the office, that means that the local businesses around those offices, they go bankrupt. You no longer go for lunch there, you no longer go and buy groceries there, you no longer X, Y, Z, right? They depend on those economics. And I go like, yeah, fair point. But what about the local communities where you live? How much time do you spend in those communities? How much money do you spend with those communities? And people tell me like, what do you mean? I said, well, as far as I know, we don't live in cages. We live in the midst of different communities, right? Small towns, big towns, suburban area, whatever else. We also contribute to those economies in our own way. So what we're going to see is a massive diversification, if I can say that, of not having everything in a big metropolis, right? And then from there onwards, moving elsewhere from that point of view, right? And I think that we're going to see a lot of that diversification of folks going and thinking, well, maybe I no longer need to commute for 2 hours every day to do work. Maybe I can either work from where I am or look for a place that is closer, right? So we're going to see a lot of that happening over time. Um, Frankly, I was expecting that it would be taking longer with the pandemic and everything else, that we will have more time to experiment with this. But like I said, those studies are showing that people are desperate to go to the office because they are overwhelmed and fatigued and burned out because they're trying to mimic what was happening in the office as opposed to trying to think different and do different, right? Now, the interesting thing here is, so what do we do with those who still insist on going to the office? Like you mentioned, there will be a number of them, plenty of them, that who would say, I still want to go to the office. I still want to commute. And I said, be my guest, but then don't bitch that you hate the work, because we're not going to
But
tolerate it.
yeah,
I won't.
I understand that point, but I still see the challenge that we need to integrate those people in this new type of organ, organization and working together. I mean, we have those people who have this new mindset. We have those people who have still the old mindset. They
Mm-hmm.
may not even be managers, just normal knowledge workers.
Right.
And then on the other end, we have first line workers who are forced to be somewhere to do their
Mm-hmm.
work, certainly
Mm-hmm.
as well. So it's not just a hybrid, the challenge of the hybrid mode. It's for me, it's the challenge to really integrate the information flows and so on in some kind of space, because formerly it was bumping into somebody, and nowadays we have some people who are doing all the connections and exchanges already on social networks, and
Right.
others who are still offline. So how do we get this together?
Well,
Get
if you
this
look,
together to be
if you look
effective?
into it, and I agree with you, one of the challenges that has been always put forward is, what do we do about essential workers or frontliners that do not have the access to digital tools, right? And one of the things that I have seen over the last few months, again, COVID-19 as an accelerator of that, is that lots of organizations are putting together the intranet in people's pockets through the mobile phone. They all have developed, or a good number of them have developed, employee apps where they can feel connected to the organization while they're on the move, right? I mean, DHL, as primary example in Germany, has got a massive employee app that has got nearly 60,000 of the frontline workers on it daily in 1 year. That's work that Julie Dudenko and her team have developed in one single year. Maybe obviously preparation takes a bit longer and getting all the approvals and the design and everything else. But since they kicked off, right, which is a year and a half maybe, they had those many. What does that say? It says that there's an appetite to be connected with the organization, to be there with the organization. It's just that organizations didn't understand that mobile devices are pervasive all over the place, and that you can reach your employees through those mobile experiences. I mean, remember, 10 years ago, it was all about mobile first. But how many organizations did mobile first? Very few. COVID-19 hits, and what happens is, because a pandemic forces you to keep your employees in the know, especially when they're on the road. I mean, the other great example, one of my favorites, is a Stagecoach in the UK, right? The bus network. Bus drivers constantly using the application to keep up about what was happening, where there were things that they were seeing, ideas, suggestions that they were having, pictures that they were sharing about their routines for the day and everything else. All of that is helping those frontline workers find a way to be connected through their mobile devices, right? So I think that it's silly for organizations to say that frontline workers will have the toughest time. No, they won't, because in their personal lives, they use a mobile phone every single day for hours. I don't use my laptop beyond work for anything else than work, right? So the learning curve of how to use my mobile is a lot less than what it is my PC, right? But the other thing is, and this is I think much more interesting in terms of what can we do about those employees who need to go to the office because of their work, it requires to do so.
Who maybe also want to go to the office. I
Right, who
mean,
may
we
want to go to
still.
the office. I think that one of the things that is also happening that we may not have opened our eyes to it yet is automation, right? A lot of organizations are understanding now the amount of money that they have lost in revenue because of humans. And I'm sorry to say this so bluntly, but that's what they're thinking. So they're thinking, how can I automate vast majority of my business, because machines don't spread germs, humans do. So I need to be able to prepare for the next one. So that may be 3-5 years from now, and automate as much as I possibly can, which means that to those employees who want to go to the office, who need to go to the office because of their work, they will have to rethink, unless I do something different, my job will become obsolete, and then I will have a bigger problem. So my advice to those folks who are very keen on going to the office, who still want to go to the office because they need to, I would ask them one question. Can you have 100% guarantee that your job will be there in 5 years' time? If you have got a slight doubt, work away from it. So start working towards digital, because when you go into digital, you start thinking about new ways of working where you have, creativity, productivity, collaboration, communication. So all of those uh, human skills that machines are struggling with, right? Um, Content curation, whatever it is, right? Facilitation, caring, empathy, you name it. So what you do is you facilitate for yourself that transition into going digital, because the moment that you will need, you need to be prepared. You cannot go just and wait till the very last day when they tell you, yeah, your job is done, goodbye, I'll see you later. And then tomorrow you don't have a job anymore. You need to work on it. If you have got a slight chance that your job will be obsolete in 5 years, start working on it today. Don't leave it for tomorrow. Don't leave it for 2021. Start thinking, what can I do? Small steps. One small step every day for a year is 365 steps. Right now you have got 0. Right? So it's also the situation where you don't have to jump 100%. You don't have to do it 100%. You can go through small steps, change, goes in small increments, and you can move and progress from there, and eventually find what is comfortable with you. I mean, yesterday in this very same event from the Working Out Loud alumni, I got asked, how do you do it? How do you expose yourself? How do you post these things and narrate your work and everything else? I said, well, you start small. You start where you're comfortable with, which is probably with your colleagues, which is probably in your agenda, which is probably in the tasks that you do, and share those glimpses. It's eventually what I'm trying to say here is it's all of these new ways of working, all of these new behaviors, they're all new muscles that we need to strengthen. And how do we strengthen? Exercising them. We're not going to get like really strong digital arms, like as if magic. No, we need to practice them every day doing little things. And little things can be read something interesting, like something interesting, comment on something, write a short 2-3 lines, right? Nothing else than that. It doesn't require to go and write full pages. I mean, I know people tell me, why do you write so much or so long blog posts? I say, well, because I've been blogging for 18 years. I can go like crazy with my blog posts, but it's 18 years of writing, of 18 years of building that muscle, right? I may be good or bad, that's out to the audience, right? But I have that muscle built over that time, right? And this is what I keep telling people. If you feel that your job is going to be obsolete in 5 years, do it now, because in 10 years it will be, and you will still have to work in 10 years, right? And that gives you an opportunity to, again, that call to action for building your personal agency. Like, where do you want to be in 5, 10 years time? I mean, if someone would have told me in 2001 that in 2019 I would be 2020, sorry, I would be working in Gran Canaria doing the stuff that I love doing and getting paid for it, I would have told them, you're crazy. 18 years, 19 years later, I'm there, right? So it's also that ability to think for the long term, right? And don't sort of like focus that this is just an interim patch that we do now and then that's it. No, this is, like I said before, there will be other instances, other events that will provoke us to go back again to work from home or to work anywhere away from the office. So if we haven't done anything now, at least prepare yourself for whatever comes next, right? Because there will be a next. And how prepared we are for that one is down to our own personal choice, right? From that point of view.
Great. It's 5:15, so we're already at the end.
Okay. Well, that was a nice ending. Calling people to like get ready, like get your arms together.
Yeah.
I think if I were to summarize what I would take out from this conversation, Bjorn, is for folks is to say, we have a unique opportunity, or better said, we've been given by a third-party agent, the bug. We have been given the opportunity to redefine the work for the near future. Let's not make it into the past.
But you're also putting a lot of impetus on each owns responsibility.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
creating your own future. I mean, it's not the organization that will change you. It's you that
organizations don't change. People do. And people will only do if the conditions for them are right. So the only thing the organizations can do is to facilitate that the conditions are there. And frankly, organizations haven't done that. But the bug, COVID-19, has changed those conditions. So one of the things that we have learned from the pandemic is that when we were talking about digital transformation, when we were talking about change and change management and doing enablement, and you and I know for many years about the various different reasons that people and organizations told us as to why they were not doing it. We didn't have enough funding, we didn't have, manpower, we didn't have the skills, we didn't have the tools, we didn't have, communications plans in place. All of those. Now we know that there were lame excuses. It was all from day one about motivation. Were you motivated enough to change? And right now, COVID-19 has forced us all to be motivated to change. Why? Because the alternative is potential death, right? The what's in it for me from going digital has changed altogether. Everything that we have been told is now down to one thing: not dying. I say, yeah, and then people tell me, yeah, but when I'm in the office, it's all really secure, safety regulations, everyone wearing masks and everything else. And I go, yes, and that's absolutely lovely, and it needs to happen. But how about the way to the office? What's your commute like at the moment? Are you in jam-packed underground trains, buses, or whatever? I'm not sure that that's the best way to go back to work, right? For instance, and that's just one example, right? So, but indeed, what I think we need to understand is that it has always been about motivation, and that's one of the things that whenever I talk to senior leaders and they tell me that they don't want to change, I say, like, where's your motivation? You don't have any motivation. And I get reminded about this particular quote that's been shared a little bit over there, that those who profit from the status quo are the most reluctant to want to change it. So what I'm basically saying is those who do not like the current status quo, change it, challenge it, do something about it. Because if you don't, you might as well carry on with what you're doing. And if you're telling me that you love the office, going to the office before, then we have been lying to ourselves for a long while. For a long while, right? So personal
Great
agency.
last words.
Yeah. and then going boom.
Thank you, Luis,
My pleasure.
for this nice hour of talking. And
thank you.
Thank you, everybody out there who have been following us. There have been quite some people on YouTube and Facebook. I've seen them at least. Yeah, thank you. We're at the end of our IOM talk for this week. We have another special IOM talk next week as a conversation cafe, where we invite as a Christmas special, where we have also some more people joining in the conversations, but also you are as a follower, you can also join the conversation, but it will be in German again next week. So maybe you have a look at our website at iomsummit.de and see what's upcoming next week. And thank you, Luis, again.
Thank you, Björn. Thanks for having me.
Hopefully in the future again, and
we will, one way or another. Exactly. Thanks to Björn for having me.
Just stay here for a second, and I get us off the stream at first. And yeah, and there we go. Okay, now.